Hi, everyone. We are here today with Barbara Lamb, and we are so excited to be talking with you, Barbara. Barbara is someone we look up to very much so because of her years and years of research in the field of regression, hypnotic regression, and her research on ET contact. And we just can't wait to get into this conversation and learn from you, Barbara. Thank you for being here. How are you today?
Oh, I'm fine, and thank you very much. What a pleasure.
We're so glad to have you here, Barbara. You're just an icon, and also being a female leader in the field is something we like to highlight because it really is a very male-dominated field. So we always love when we have a powerful, wise woman such as yourself, and we've really been looking forward to this interview so much because of the depth and breadth of your work, which is so expansive and not the usual kind of hypnosis that people are used to hearing about. So
right.
Maybe we can start with how you first got onto this path. That's often where we like to start with these conversations is, your earliest memory of something unusual or something different, something that made you suddenly go, life is not quite what I thought. When did that first start for you?
Well, actually, when I was a very young child, I used to sometimes touch something physical, like touch a wall, let's say, and then think, this isn't all there is. In other words, I was thinking the material world, although I didn't think that phrase when I was really little, but as far as I can remember, I'd think, this house and this wall and this car, these material things are not all that there is. And I didn't know what I meant by that. I just knew there was a lot more that nobody was talking about. And if I ever mentioned anything like that to my parents, they'd say, well, no, I mean, I don't know what you mean, and so anyway, I've always had a curiosity about reality, although I didn't think of it in those particular words, when I was very young. But anyway, I grew up and I always knew that I wanted to be helpful to people. And I didn't know how that was. And so I went through college and was a philosophy major trying to figure out this thing about reality. And then I had a couple of jobs after college and was married and had 3 children and so forth. Grew up and then eventually I became licensed as a psychotherapist. That was back in the mid 1970s. And that I was so delighted to find that path of work. And I did regular psychotherapy for a number of years. And I found that sometimes with certain people, I was sort of inspired to lead them into a state of deep relaxation. What I didn't realize at the time was that I was really doing hypnosis, but I just called it deep relaxation. And I was doing a lot of movement work. I was actually all through the late 1960s and 70s and early 80s, I was doing a lot of dance therapy work. And part of that involved having the people, after moving a lot, have them get into a state of deep relaxation. And it turned out to be very therapeutic. So those were the things I was working with, and doing a lot of workshops where I would have people exploring things like sending energy and receiving energy while moving with music on. And we had some really incredible experiences with large groups of people, maybe 200 people at a time. And I mean, people would say, wow, this is amazing. I've never experienced anything like this. So that was really my passion, doing things like that, and also the sit-down therapy sessions. Well, it was pointed out to me eventually that I was doing hypnosis. And I thought, well, if I really am doing hypnosis, I really ought to be trained in it. I mean, I ought to really know what I'm doing. So I took a couple of courses of general hypnosis. Those courses did not really include regression. I think they mentioned hypnotic regression, but they didn't teach it. But in the mid-1980s, I heard about the Association for Past Life Research and Therapies, which fortunately happened to have their center about 45 minutes drive from my house in California.
Well, that's a fun synchronicity.
Yes, and so I met lots of other therapists, excellent therapists. I was very impressed, who were occasionally at least doing past life therapy regressions. And I had before that on a couple of trips. One was to Peru and one was to Egypt, or actually 2 trips to Egypt, during which time at each place, I had a few what I came to call spontaneous past life recalls. In other words, I'd be in a certain location and I'd suddenly have this big memory coming up. It seemed like a memory and not just my imagination. And the memory would be very detailed about the kind of person I was, male or female, and skin color and position in life, and what I was mostly doing in that particular lifetime at that location where in this lifetime I was actually visiting. And so some of these spontaneous past life recalls were full of really strong emotion. And I, came back from those 2 trips thinking, it really must be that we have a whole long series of lifetimes. Whereas before I had those experiences, I've had, of course, heard of reincarnation, but I didn't really think it was real. I thought it was sort of a quaint belief that certain people in India and other locations had, but I didn't really put any reality to it. But after having those spontaneous memories of myself as a different person in previous lifetimes, I started taking it seriously. So I went for that training and took the past life therapy training for 5 years through the mid to late 1980s. And then at the very last module of training, the trainer woman, whom I respected tremendously, said at the beginning of that module of training, she said, those of you who are doing regression work need to know that it's possible that at some time someone will come to you with a complaint of having been visited by some very unusual beings who are not human, and perhaps even taken away for a while.
Oh, wow.
And they might be very confused, even very distressed, in some cases traumatized, in certain cases delighted, in other cases. And this is real, and somebody might come to you for that reason. Well, I had never heard of that before. I'd heard of UFOs. I'd seen a couple of UFO movies like Close Encounters of the Third Kind and E.T. Loved both of those movies, but thought it was all science fiction. But this got my attention. Not only did the trainer say that, which I have just said to you, but right after she said that, I heard a big voice in my head, and it wasn't my voice. And the voice said very emphatically and loudly, pay attention to this, Barbara. You will be doing this.
Wow.
We'll be working with people who have had these experiences with these unusual beings. Well, I was absolutely stunned. I was stunned because of what the trainer had said, that some people are having these experiences and might want regressions to find out more details. And then this insistent voice telling me to pay attention because I will be doing that.
Do you know where that voice was coming from? Like now, years later?
No, not really. I mean, I can make some guesses. I can guess it's my higher self. That's a pretty logical one to think of. But I think it had something to do with the beings.
Mhm.
And I'll say that because there have been so many instances since then that when I've been regressing somebody to an extraterrestrial experience that they've had, that the beings sometimes talk to me
Yeah.
during the regression. So I think that it was one of them who said, pay attention to this, Barbara, you will be doing this. So anyway, it took me 3 years from that time to try to find out about the UFO phenomenon and extraterrestrial encounters and decide for myself if I thought this was really real. And I concluded, after hearing different speakers and reading various things, I concluded that, yeah, I guess this must be really happening for some people.
What was convincing you? Like, what did you find? What information did you find? Or, who was it that helped you feel like, yes, this is real? Because you could have read all of that and been like, but there would have had to be something that was very convincing. What stood out to you?
Yes, well, I think the most convincing thing was that in those years, the 1980s, early 90s, I was going twice a year to a big conference forum called the Whole Life Expo.
Okay.
And at the Whole Life Expo, I found myself being drawn to listening to the speakers who were talking about their work with extraterrestrial experiencers. And so, in other words, I heard Bud Hopkins and David Jacobs and John Mack. And it was pretty convincing to me what they were talking about. They were already doing this work. And they gave so many details, so much information that it all added up during that 3 years until a point when I thought, yeah, I think this must really be happening to some people, even though nobody I knew anywhere was talking about it. Which is something I was looking into on my own. And then one morning in 1991, I just love this. One morning I was taking a shower, and that's a good thinking time for me. And I found myself thinking, now that I think those things are really happening, extraterrestrial beings are really visiting some people and taking them away for a while. And now I think that I could handle it if anyone would ever come to me for that reason, because I could just use the same regression techniques. I had already at that point had 7 years of experience of guiding people into past life regressions or earlier in this life regressions in some cases.
Wow.
So I thought I could use the same methods. If anybody did, I didn't really think anybody would come, but I was just thinking, yeah, if that happens, I don't have to worry about it. I think I could manage that with the regression work I already know how to do. So 2 hours later, after thinking that in the shower, I was in a metaphysical bookstore, and the woman behind the counter somehow recognized me. I don't know why or how, but she said, "Oh, aren't you Barbara Lamb? Don't you do regression work?" And I was surprised and I said, "Yes." And she said, "Oh, would you please work with my 21-year-old daughter who is so traumatized by having these unusual visitors in her room at night. And
Wow.
she, like they're taking her away, and all kinds of things are happening very frequently. And she's dropped out of college. She's dropped out of her part-time job. And she's wants to sleep between me and my husband at night because she's so terrified of being alone and having these beings come. So anyway, I agreed to work with her. And
2 hours later, wow.
yeah, I mean, so that just showed me that this is right, that kind of synchronicity.
Yeah.
Okay, this is definitely what I'm supposed to be doing. So I did work with that young woman, and it seemed to be very successful. We had 6 sessions, 6 regressions. And then she came in one day and said, guess what? I'm going to be moving with my boyfriend away from my parents. And we're going to be renting a little cottage, a little cabin out in the canyon behind where we all lived. And I said, well, that's wonderful, but that's wilderness there. And you're probably going to continue to have visits from these other beings. And she said, yes, I know, and that's okay.
Oh,
Oh, wow. She had got, oh, wow. So she got into a place where she felt really comfortable with this contact.
Yeah, I mean, that she had become not only comfortable with it, but realizing that there were some real gifts with it, some real advantages. For instance, in one of the regressions, she went back to an experience where she had a vicious ear infection. And in the regression, we went through the experience of her lying in bed that night, hurting like the dickens. And that suddenly there were 3 tall, white, very white beings there. They rolled her over on her side, and they were working with her ear. She could feel it. She was in sort of a semi-awake state, but she could roll her eyes around and see that the beings in these long hands, long fingers were coming. She could feel it. They were doing something in her ear. Anyway, they healed that vicious infection, and she went on back to sleep perfectly comfortably, and the infection remained non-existent after that. And she had also been healed during the daytime when she and her sister had been riding along in a car during the late afternoon, and they noticed that there was a blue beam of light coming in through the back window of the car. And then they noticed that the car motor was starting to sort of peter out. So they pulled off the road and they jumped out, and there was a field right there. So they ran into the field. We were running across the field, and my client realized that there was this blue beam of light that was following her and hitting her in her lower back, where, by the way, she had been having considerable back pain and had not been able to get any help for it. So she stopped running. Her sister kept running, but she stopped, just sort of bathed in the warmth of this blue beam of light. And as she did that, the pain was getting less and less and less until it was completely gone. Then the 2 girls went back out of the field and into their car and drove on to do whatever they had been setting out to do. So that healing twice by these beings really impressed her. And she realized that they, through the regressions, realized that even when they would take her away, they wouldn't do anything terrible to her. And that the whole thing was really okay. Even that she had been presented one time with a hybrid baby and told her that it was her baby. So combined with their material. So anyway, that was a great start. And then I thought, well, if anyone else ever should choose to come for that kind of reason, having experiences with these other beings, now I know for sure I can really work effectively with that. And I didn't necessarily expect that anybody else would come, but about 4 months later, another lady came for that purpose. Then a month later, another one, and another one, and another one. And so that was 1991. And by 1994, I realized that I was working with 17 different people who were having these experiences.
Wow.
That means I wasn't working with them necessarily every week, but on occasion. And then one of these people said, you know, this is so fascinating, really, and I'm not afraid of it anymore. And I want to know if other people are having these things. I said, oh, yes, there are. And some of them are finding their way to me. And she said, well, could I meet some of them? So I quickly thought, sort of counted up on my fingers. Well, I have 17 people I'm working with currently who are all having these kinds of encounter experiences with extraterrestrials. So I got together a group in my living room, and that was 1994. So that was my very first experiencer group, and I continued that group until I moved away from there in 2017. So we had all of those years with some of those people, and then occasionally a new person would find me, and I would regress them and realize, yeah, that this person's an experiencer and would qualify to be in this group. So that was wonderful. And then around 1995, I had been going to the really huge conferences, the International UFO Congress conferences. And I decided, you know, part of the conferences, of which are focused mostly around the subject of UFOs, there are a lot of people here at these conferences who are having encounter experiences. So I convinced the conveners of the conference to let me run an experiencer support group. And the very first day we offered it, there were 50 people.
Oh, wow.
Who signed up, who came to that group. And that has continued since then. So for many years at that particular conference, until just recently, I led the experiencer support groups. And then other conferences began to hear about this, other UFO conferences, and would ask me to lead the support groups there. So anyway, that's been a very rich experience in the sense that I've heard from so many people, even many people I've not had the opportunity to do regressions with. And then, oh, it's been 2,500 or more. The number keeps increasing. People whom I have done regressions with to their extraterrestrial encounters. So some people have had many regressions. One lady had 60 regressions to her lifelong of extraterrestrial encounters. And so it's almost 5,000 regressions that I've conducted to people's extraterrestrial experiences. So there is a huge amount of beings, number one, different kinds of beings, and they all have their own agendas.
Yes.
Some of them seem to be very positive agendas from our point of view. Some of them seem to be more self-serving, and people do not like them so much, like physical exams and poking and probing and so forth. But even with those experiences, very often we discover in the regression, to the person's surprise, that there's been a healing as part of that experience. In other words, the beings have a way of knowing about all the systems of our bodies and how they're functioning. I think they have much more wonderful diagnostic abilities than we humans have with each other. Anyway, when they discover that there's something wrong in the person's body, very often they will go ahead and heal it right then and there. And so there have been lots and lots of descriptions of the healing process from different people who have experienced that. And then sometimes when the beings discover there's something wrong with the person, they will bring it to that person's attention. For instance, they'll say, well, you may not have been aware of it, but you have a problem with your liver. We suggest that when you go home, you go to your doctor and ask him to check your liver. And when people have done that, checked the part that they've been warned was not functioning well, it's true. They really did have a problem with that particular organ.
Barbara,
Yeah.
have you found that that's something that is being delivered directly to you in the regression from the beings, or something that's being remembered from a memory of being on a ship or being with the beings previously?
Well, first of all, in the regression, it's as close as we can possibly get to reliving that experience of the visitors coming,
Right.
being taken, how they're taken, what they're taken to, which usually seems to be a ship in the air high up. And then they experience it moment by moment by moment as if it is happening now. So when they're on a medical table with the beings around, and the beings are either doing something or talking to them, the person being regressed is mentioning all of these details as they are happening. So it's as if I'm hearing the being saying, I'm not really hearing them.
Right.
I'm hearing the person repeating it,
Okay.
but it's almost as if I'm hearing what the beings are saying to the person.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Then very often it happens, this is very common, that when a person is on a medical table on the ship and being examined, poked, probed, etc., and if I say, do you want to know what they're doing or why they're doing this? And the person being regressed usually will say, yes, I would like to know. And I say, well, you can ask them. And you can ask them in your mind, just with your thoughts, or you can ask them out loud, whichever you choose. And they will ask you to, they ask just in their mind. And then there's a moment of silence or so, few moments. And then they'll repeat what they heard the being say to them. Like, we have been suspecting that you have something unusual with your blood, and we're testing for that. That would be an example. Or they'll tell whatever else they're doing. Or we're here to fix your spleen because we know that there's been an infection, or we've detected that there's an infection in your spleen. So once the person hears what's going on and that it's really for their benefit, oh, that makes all the difference in the world.
At Star Family Wisdom, we're experiencers of ET contact. That's right, we're in communication with ET beings we know as our star family. We've had lives in advanced civilizations, and we're here to be a bridge between the galactic community and you. And the galactic community can't wait to meet you. That's why we created the Meet the Star Races course. In this course, I teach you about the star races who are in contact with Earth right now. How do I know who the star races are? Well, my star family guided me to the information they want you to have. Just like all of the other information here at Star Family Wisdom, we bring you the wisdom and guidance that our ET friends want you to know. You'll learn about our true ancient history, why the ETs have been here on Earth, and what we can learn from our ET brothers and sisters. The star races are part of our history, and they're part of our future. Join the galactic community today with our Meet the Star Races course and use the code GALACTIC at checkout to get 50% off.
Because you're touching on so many, I mean, there's there's so much to talk about just from how we're just starting off this interview. But one of the biggest topics that we like to explore on this podcast and in our content at Star Family Wisdom as well is addressing fear, right? Addressing fear and fears that we are conditioned to have in just our so-called regular 3D existence, but
Sure.
also fear when it comes to experiences and direct contact, or whatever is occurring in someone's life that they can't make sense of, that is paranormal, quote unquote. So
Right.
can you talk a little bit about, because you're reminding me a lot of the research that, for example, Ray Hernandez has done, where he's collected huge numbers of data, huge amounts of data from people that have had ET experiences specifically. And it's the same thing as what you said, that, the majority of them, when they review their experience with someone, with the support of someone who's in a position of knowledge and to help guide through that experience and get them over the trauma of it,
Right.
they usually realize that their initial experience was fearful, but the end result is actually beneficial. So
Yes.
can you talk a little bit about I guess the presence of fear and how you see fear operating in all of this? Because you were mentioning also that there are some beings who have positive intentions, some that don't. There are people who have fearful responses when they don't need to have a fearful response. It seems like it's a very complex and very interesting dynamic. So can you talk about that? Yeah.
Well, first of all, I completely understand that if you're asleep at night, anybody, if you were asleep at night and then suddenly you wake up, there's something that's awakening you, and you're aware of either a bright light coming in through the window. This is very typical, or beings coming in through the window, or beings there in the room with you. And I mean, it would be startling enough if they were human beings.
Absolutely.
But would naturally go into fear. What's going to happen? What are they here for? But when you consider also that these beings are clearly not human, and they're very unusual looking from our point of view, and many people don't have any idea what they are. More and more people now are hearing about these things. So if it would happen to them, they'd think, oh, it must be the extraterrestrials or the aliens, as many people call them. But if you don't know anything about that at all, and then suddenly here are these unusual looking beings right there in your room, in your private place that you had considered safe and yours, and you had no idea how they even got in or what they're there for, and they look so different. And so I think the unknown factor is a big, big part of the fear, as well as that they're there in their environment. What are they here for? What's going to happen? Who are they? What are they going to do?
Right.
And so, it's so understandable that is extremely frightening to people. And even the most loving beings in the world, and some very loving ones do come to many people, even then it's the shock, it's the suddenness, the surprise that you didn't negotiate this, that you know of. You didn't invite this, you didn't expect this. I mean, what's going on? So many people wake up and there's a being, or maybe more than one, and the being seems to be sort of glowing in some cases even sort of semi-transparent. And it's, the being looks rather beautiful because of this glow, this energy. And so it's not like a ghoulish, gargoyle sort of figure.
Right.
It would be quite a beautiful figure. It might look fairly human in some instances, and yet sort of, as they say, semi-transparent and glowing. So it's very puzzling. But with these very, very positive beings who come, people often, they have the startle effect and they shock. And yet, the more they look, the more they realize, oh, I guess it's all right. I don't know what's going on, but I guess it's all right because this is such a lovely being. It seems so peaceful and so harmless. And then, of course, a peaceful, harmless experience happens after that. But some of the beings are not very wonderful to look at from our point of view.
Yeah, there's a lot of diversity in the universe, we have come to find out.
Yes, absolutely. And
Yeah.
I often think, that some of them look pretty strange to us. But can you imagine how we must look to them?
Yeah.
Yes, there was
Good
a funny,
point.
there was a
Yeah.
funny
I
Yeah.
often
There was a funny story that I was working with Grant Cameron for a couple of years, and he told me the story once that he'd heard from someone who had said that one of their beings who they had a very friendly ongoing relationship with, they would have conversations with this being, and it was not a fear-based situation for them at all. But this being was like, well, how do you, exactly the same thing, how do you think you look to us? You've got all those teeth, like it's horrifying. Keep
Oh,
your
yes.
Keith, that's
Well, I had an experience once back in the very early 1990s. And it was when I was just kind of getting into this work. I was at a conference in Laramie, Wyoming. And it was, they were called the Rocky Mountain Conference on UFO Investigations, put on by wonderful Leo Sprinkle, who unfortunately is no longer with us. He was an early pioneer in this work. Anyway, I was in a little plane, like a little commuter plane from Laramie, Wyoming to Denver, Colorado, to come back to California. And in that little plane, there were two things that happened that were so strange. One of them was that I had a window seat in this little plane, and I noticed that, maybe about 20 or 30 feet out from my window of the plane, in other words, right next to us, was a thin, black, completely black cloud. And I noticed as I kept looking out the window, that little black cloud was following us. I thought, well, that's strange. I mean, a black cloud. And by the way, it was a clear, sunny day with blue skies, no other clouds in sight, but here was this black cloud and it was following us. And I thought, well, that's really weird. And then we had to kind of curve around to land at Denver and walk down the outside stairs and walk across the tarmac to get into the terminal. And when I got into, and I felt kind of weird. I don't know what kind of weird, but it just sort of felt strange. And then I walked into the terminal and I was absolutely shocked because it was as if I was seeing a terminal full of human beings for the first time. I was something different.
Oh, wow.
Really. And it had something to do with that black cloud.
For sure.
So I was not me. I was a different being from somewhere else.
Oh my goodness.
And as I walked through the terminal, I was just undone, overcome with the density of that environment and the heaviness of these human beings. and the variety, everyone looked different kind of clothing, different faces, different skin tones, different hair. And then all the stuff that they had with them, carry-on suitcases and bags and water bottles, and some were children and some were adults. And I walked through the crowd to get through that terminal to the other terminal where my plane would take me back to California. And all the way through, I was just almost bowled over, as if seeing these humans for the first time from the point of view of not being a human. And I mean, it was just overwhelming. Oh, and the smells, the different scents of all these people.
Did your own body feel different to you?
Yes.
Okay.
It's like you were tapping into another aspect of yourself, like the ET aspect of yourself that was maybe in that cloud on that ship. Like, that's what it makes me think of, that.
Yeah.
Yeah. You were like having this almost like bilocation kind of experience where all of a sudden, yeah, you were perceiving all of this from this other point of view, this other being out there.
It could be that, or it could be that another being from that black cloud came
Yeah.
and resided temporarily. It didn't go on forever within my body. Now, what I didn't do while walking through the terminal and past all these groups of people, what I didn't do was look down and see what my body looked like.
That was my next
And
question.
I certainly felt different. And so anyway, that was a remarkable experience, seeing human beings, a whole big, I mean, hundreds of them, for the first time, and just being overwhelmed. And the sounds, the noises, because those human beings were talking.
And this went on for a little while. Like, this wasn't just a quick kind of spontaneous experience like this. It sounds like it went on the entire time you were walking through the terminal.
It probably went on for at least 10 minutes.
Wow.
And then there was sort of an open area without many people, a few people walking, but nobody sitting down in groups like that. And then I got to the other terminal. And by the time I'd gotten through that open terminal area, I felt more like me, and gradually more and more. And then I sat there at my boarding gate and waited, and oh, wow, I'm me now. But that was amazing. Yeah.
Has that ever happened since then, or was that the only time that sort of experience has happened?
No, I think that's the only time.
Okay.
I've never
Did you?
Or if it had.
I've
Yeah.
never heard of. I mean, I've never heard directly from someone before having that kind of experience. I mean, Mark Sims, for example, was inhabited by Tejbar, right? But that was more of, hello, my name is Tejbar. I would like to come into your body. And then there's a sort of conversation where Mark agreed to let Tejbar come in, and then he stayed in his body for 13 days. But it was this ongoing, he has this incredible experience. That's another conversation. But I'm just using that as an example because it was a hello, knock, knock, can I come in kind of thing. And yes, you can. Okay, now we're going to work together. But for you, this was purely spontaneous and
yes. No hello, no goodbye. It was just, I was different. Now, I must not have looked like one of those beings, because I say that because I didn't notice anybody looking at me strangely, like, oh my God, what's that? That didn't happen. But in fact, I don't think anybody looked at me at all. But I certainly was looking at them.
Well, and we hear stories of beings taking human form and walking among us, not just, the hybrid phenomena, but actually,
Right.
embodying a human just to experience Earth and to come, see what it's like. Have you encountered many of those instances in your regression cases? Is that something you've explored much of?
Not so much one of them taking our form, but definitely it's been expressed many times by the beings that that they are extremely interested in us. And there are lots of reasons for that. Being very interested in planet Earth and very interested in all the incredible amount of life forms that we have. In fact, one extraterrestrial who used to channel through one of my clients, and I got to talk to him through the channeling many, many, many times for a period of about 11 years. And he said that planet Earth has more life forms on it, that is, not only human, animal, reptile, fish, mammals in the ocean, but plant life and germ life, everything. We have more species and subspecies and genus and so forth put together than all of the other planets that have life put together. So there are plenty of other planets that have life, but not so many forms of life.
That was also channeled through one of Dolores Cannon's clients. So that's consistent information that has come through a few cases. And I think that speaks to how special our planet is and how they are trying to wake us up to understand how beautiful it is that we get to experience this. I'm sure you did hear a lot about that in these cases. In Meet the Hybrids book, Barbara wrote a ton about, what the hybrid humans have learned from their star family. Maybe you can share a little bit about that with us and for the audience to hear a bit about some of those, I guess, more positive, uplifting messages that have come through these experiences.
Oh, yes, I will. But I also just want to add that not only do we have so many more species here on Earth than all of the other planets put together, but many, many of these different species of extraterrestrials claim that they help to seed us. They help to create us as the human beings that we are. It wasn't just one group, but it was various groups. We hear often about the Anunnaki having come and created us by adding certain DNA to earlier life forms like hominid, ape life forms. And there may very well have been that, but there are other groups that claim that they help to seed us too, to tinker with our DNA and to make us the beings that we are now. So in a sense, it's almost like we're their children, or they consider us as their children, and they want to know how we're doing. So here we've got this incredible planet, unlike any other planet in existence. And we were partly them. So they're very, very interested. And some of them are more scientifically interested in us. And that's why many people experience that they're put on a medical table and they're kind of examined and poked and probed and so forth. And those beings who do that sort of work often seem to be just very hard-hearted, in the sense of just very scientific. They don't show emotion. They don't show caring. They just are trying to learn what they can learn about us. And then there are other beings who do a lot of that same work and yet do healing work, do work to help us. And so, by the way, when a person is on the ship and on a medical table, there usually is a variety of beings around that table, all contributing to doing the work, or in some cases learning, like medical interns would learn from a surgeon, for instance. And so there's just lots that can happen on that medical table. And then I must hasten to say that many people have experiences where they're taken on a ship, and it has nothing to do whatsoever with being on a medical table. Just all kinds of experiences that happen. And some of them are really very interesting and welcomed to the people being taken for them, such as classes. Children into classes on the ship, and they learn wonderful skills that they never would learn here. Like, for instance, how to know what each other are thinking, or send thoughts just with their thinking and have them received accurately by the other children, or how to do teleportation. That's one of the most fun things for the kids, is that they sit around a circle on a floor, and usually there's one or two extraterrestrial adults of different heights, different types, with them. And sometimes some extraterrestrial children are in that group as well, and hybrid children too. And so they practice moving things with their mind, like there'll be a little feather in the middle of the circle that they're sitting around on the floor. And it'll be this side of the circle turn to just focus on that feather and move it with their minds, move it across the circle. And then it's their turn to move the feather back. And then they'll go to something a little bit bigger, a little bit heavier, like a piece of paper. And then when they can move that one, maybe it'll be a piece of cardboard. And then it'll get heavier and heavier as they become more and more astute at actually moving these objects. And then some kids have even gotten to the fact where they can take like a basketball sitting in the middle of the circle and roll that just with their minds, not touching anything, not moving at all, just rolling it with their minds. And then even I've had one child say, we actually were able to lift that ball up and throw it in the air across the circle. the kid sitting on the other side of the circle. So, I mean, that's getting pretty darned accomplished.
Yes.
So adults too don't sit on the floor around a circle, but they very often are taught a lot of psychic skills too, psychometry and teleportation and all kinds of wonderful skills that we know that some humans have and probably most humans don't have, but people who are taken for these experiences often are taught and coached. Oh, and they're also taught healing skills in many cases. And that's wonderful. And they come back and they become healers. So some of a few of the clients I was working with quite frequently in the 1990s, they actually left their corporate jobs or business jobs, whatever they were, and opened up a healing clinic because of the healing techniques that they had learned by the extraterrestrials. So I think that that's very impressive and very wonderful.
It's absolutely amazing. It's absolutely amazing. And actually the parental aspect of what you're talking about, how there are beings who feel sort of parental towards us, right? They want to monitor our development physically, psychically, otherwise they want to encourage our evolution. That's something I'm interested in from a purely selfish vantage point, because both Jenna and I have had this experience that when we have our communication, it always comes with a distinctly kind of parental feeling. At least for me, it does. It comes with this very kind, very loving, very firm, calm presence and voice, where it's always with this feeling of love and guidance, like you would get from a parent. So
but also from the standpoint of, we are here to learn our lessons and do our work, right? And that there, there's like a limited, interference that will happen there, right? Like in a parental way, where sometimes it's like being guided and directed to go learn the lesson you're supposed to learn. you know?
Yeah, like don't forget to do your homework, you haven't done your chores. But
Yeah.
then also this rise of children, these new crystal children or indigo children or more sensitive children that are being born embodied in this world. You must be seeing more of that, Barbara, because I know you've been working more with children and developing books for them and materials and tools that children can use here on Earth in the 3D. Can you talk a little bit about that? I really love that aspect of what you're doing.
Okay, that was an awesome part one with Barbara. We're really getting into it, but part two is even better. So if you're liking it and you love Barbara, come back for part two. We get into some really cool conversation about kids and their experiences with ETs. We spill the beans on Barbara's incognito role in Dolores Cannon's book, The Custodians. So there's a lot of fun stuff in part two.
Yes, we dig a little deeper with Barbara on the personal side and ask her questions about her own experiences, which she doesn't often talk about. And I love that she's leaning towards children, encouraging people to understand that there's a new wave of births happening on Earth, more than one wave, really, of these indigo children, starseed children, psychic children, whatever you want to call them, who are coming into the world and are part of what we're going to be doing next. And Barbara is encouraging that. So if you're interested in what's happening in the new world on Earth, if you just love Barbara and what you heard in part one, like we did, join us again for part two. She really has amazing things to say from her 44 years of experience.
And if you are curious about those waves of souls coming into Earth and why there are so many people having these experiences, go check out our episode, The 3 Waves of Volunteers, where I dissect Dolores Cannon's book, The 3 Waves of Volunteers, and that helps give a little background as to what's going on here and then some of what we talk about with Barbara.
Yes, it'll definitely help you develop a deeper and more enriched understanding. And as always, like, subscribe, share with your friends, share with your family, and come back for more, because when you're not here, we miss you. So come back, share your thoughts and ideas and questions with us, and be part of our growing community. We really want to make change happen here on this world, and this conversation is part of it.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you for part two.
See you for part two.